And we're live. And as you pointed out earlier, live doesn't mean that we're broadcasting this right in the moment,
Yeah.
but we are recording. So, Dr.
Awesome.
Marieta Pehlivanova, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.
yeah, let's be honest. You're having me. I'm sitting down with you in your office at DOPS,
Yeah.
the Division of Perceptual Studies, and I am kind of geeking out. Um, the work that you're doing is pretty cool, very near and dear to my heart. And this is the flattery portion. I've got to be honest, I really appreciate the way that you guys are approaching what's largely an ignored or overlooked or explicitly left out portion of what is largely the subjective human experience,
hmm
especially in academia. So, welcome to No More Strangers.
Yes, thank you for having me. I love talking about that stuff and bringing more awareness to your audience
Yeah, thank
and
you.
society in general, hopefully.
They're going to be pretty stoked, and I think a large part of what's fascinating to me is the way that you're bridging this sort of gap between this rote materialist, as I like to call it, sort of hard science element with finding evidentiary support for what, let's be honest, people call the woo, right? And that's a cursed term
Yes.
for what we're seeing. And from our prior conversations and looking up information, and I've been very excited about DOPS for a minute now, largely, and you can correct me or add on to this, largely you're working on pre-life memories from young children, near-death experiences, and the one that always throws me is spirit communication.
Yes. Well, I'm mostly focusing on near-death experiences and children's memories of purported past lives. I've done a
Okay.
few other things, but these are my two main topics.
I'm never sure the right frame for that because past lives, and I love that you said it that way, in Western society is a fairly loaded term, suggesting a lot of things that we're not always comfortable discussing.
It is, and you might have noticed that I said purported past life memories. When trying to publish some of that work in what we would call mainstream journals, we always have to frame it as if we're studying things around the phenomenon that these are purported memories.
Right.
Now, of course, there's a long history of work here at the Division of Perceptual Studies, pioneered by Dr. Ian Stevenson and then Dr. Jim Tucker, attempting to and succeeding in verifying some of these memories, meaning a child talks about things and in the cases when they provide specific details about what seems to be the life of an adult person who lived and died, researchers can go out and try to verify that by looking for a deceased person who matches that that description. And we have a large database of cases, many of which have been quote unquote verified. So there's that component of it. But when we talk to more mainstream audiences and try to put that work in mainstream publications, we do refer to it as purported past life memories, and maybe don't touch so much on the fact that we've been able to verify some of those, but trying to study things around it.
That strikes me as somewhat wild that they would not want you to include information that you've uncovered around these, again, purported experiences or memories, because I think that's where we get to the meat. And is it that it doesn't pass, say, scientific rigor? How's the pushback on that sort of coming into play?
I mean, the pushback is, I think a lot of people don't, first of all, they don't think this is possible. Therefore, studying something that's not possible is a waste of time or quackery or fringe science
Sure.
or whatever. As far as us trying to frame, these memories as purported and how we present that, of course, I do think it's part of a strategy where we want to get as much of that information out there in these traditional mainstream publications, but I feel like we have to do it slowly and maybe begin to normalize the topic first and maybe normalize the aspects of it that are less controversial. The fact that some young children appear to be talking about what they might say, I used to be so and so. When I was big, I had a family. I did this. I died this way.
Right.
So some children seem to be talking about that stuff, and there's a lot of evidence on that. We can focus on this without going into, well, is any of this real?
Right.
So I think we're trying to pursue a general strategy of slowly trying to put the information out there, at least with the less controversial stuff, and then maybe one day we'll get to make bolder statements in some of these mainstream publications. And we joke around here, we call it the R word. We don't
use the R word.
We don't use the R word.
Yeah, that's heavy for say Western civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a loaded frame, and there's a very real risk, right, in breaking somebody's belief systems or confronting it in such a way that they're not ready for it. Like, people have knee-jerk responses and pushback and a lot of very closely held beliefs, and that's fine. Like, any of these beliefs, either religious or dogmatic scientific doctrine. And it's fine because there's evidentiary support behind said doctrine. My current position is that we simply lack the tools to measure and identify these things in an approach which is consistent with scientific thinking, frankly, the rigorous frameworks.
Yes. And I mean, some of these aspects of a broader reality may not be something that we have the tools to measure yet. Maybe things like subtle energy, but that doesn't mean that we will never develop these tools. There's plenty of scientific tools that didn't exist that were created and validated and heavily used. So science progresses that way too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it takes a lot to change people's minds, but I personally, as a scientist, I'm not necessarily on a quest to change people's minds. We're research on these experiences and putting out evidence there. And, scientists are humans too. They come very much so, just like the rest of us, and they come with their own biases, their own belief systems, even though many scientists would like to think that they're not biased or that they're not, that they're not believers in one thing or the other. But we just put out the evidence, the research out there, and and there's a lot of it that has been produced by DOPS, especially our luminary researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Jim Tucker, who just recently retired. So Dr. Ed Kelly, too, who is our excellent theoretician who has produced 3 big volumes, basically compiling the evidence against physicalism.
Very cool.
So there is a lot of evidence out there that an interested, open-minded person or scientist can choose to engage with.
Yeah.
And of course, we're trying to produce more research, and we're also trying to do more outreach opportunities to talk about these topics. But ultimately, the only thing we can do is keep doing this work.
Yeah, I appreciate the approach that you're taking, and the way that you framed that, I think is really important, right? You're not out here to evangelize. You're here to do research. You're doing work, and where it takes you is where it takes you. So you don't have any required outcome. It's what is this phenomena?
Yes, that is a great point. And we should start with the fact that people have these experiences. Right. So as researchers, we should not be looking away from these things. These are experiences that people have, whether it's near-death experiences or kids talking about past life memories or after-death communications, these are experiences that people have repeatedly reported.
Yeah.
So that fact alone makes it imperative that we study these experiences. And not just, so the interesting thing is these experiences are not just repeatedly reported by a lot of people, but they have consistent characteristics. Whether we take NDEs, every NDE, near-death experience, is idiosyncratic, but by looking at thousands of these accounts, there are certain features that come up, maybe a sense of peace and joy, although some of them can be distressing, and a sense of disembodiment and seeing a light. A life review, connecting with deceased loved ones. So when there's such consistency in a phenomenon, we know it's a real thing. We may not know how to explain it, but it is worthy of attention. And it's also worthy of attention because, at least in the case of near-death experiences, they can transform people profoundly. We also know that through decades of research. And very importantly, the reason that exists and was founded is specifically to study these phenomena that suggest or may provide evidence that there is maybe some kind of continuity of consciousness beyond death, or a certain aspect of consciousness. So that is the, I guess, umbrella theme of all of the different experiences that we study here.
And that may be, wow, I'm trying to leave my current biases at the door here and trying to adopt a framework more along the lines within which you're working. And that is one of the more exciting ideas that's out there right now for me personally. This is relatively new in my experience and understanding of how things work. But the recognition that there's a continuity of consciousness really, at least for me personally, changes, gosh, almost everything when it comes to human incentive structures, when it comes to how we operate in the world with each other and around each other, and the way we treat each other. Like all of this starts to, and maybe that's jumping ahead too far down the assumption chain of what it means, but it seems like a good approach to start finding some of those answers around what is the meaning of all of this, and the idea of life and existence in this experience that we are, each and every one of us, in the middle of, having some form of meaning beyond whatever your religion says, us having some form of evidentiary support that can connect with people who are otherwise going to be disconnected from this line of thinking, head explode.
Yeah.
Like what this can mean for societies. And this is me jumping way ahead. We aren't there yet. I don't know if this is the conversation for that, but it has a lot of really interesting ramifications to me.
It does. And, I can address that, at least part of that, if we take near-death experiences as an example of possibly profound transformation. So first of all, one of the things, these experiences, for the people who have them, especially if it's an intense experience, they're experienced as very real. These people will say it's realer than real life. In comparison, real life feels like a dream. They'll say, I experienced this as my true home.
Yeah.
Life on earth is just this temporary blip, but my real home is here. And they tend to remember them decades later. One of the ways in which people change from this experience is that they become convinced, of course, on average, every person is different. I need to say this as a disclaimer, but on average, they tend to become convinced of the continuity of consciousness beyond death, and they also lose their fear of death. They also talk about a lot of common themes that we hear from a lot of near-death experiencers. Messages like we're all one and we should treat each other the way you want to be treated, and it's all about love. That's a very, very common message, especially during that life review which to me is the most fascinating aspect of near-death experiences, because people, a lot of times they would go through events of their lives, even it's not necessarily big events, but it might be something very small that they didn't ever think about after it happened. And they're shown how that impacted not just them re-experiencing it, but how it impacted other people.
Yeah.
And coming out of this, people would often just say, it's all about love. That's why we're here on earth, also to learn, but love, to give and to experience love. So these kinds of messages, I think as a society, we can, these are such consistent messages from people who have these experiences. I think if we try to internalize more and act this way, I definitely think that would change society.
Yeah.
Of course, someone might say, well, why would I listen to these people? It's just hallucinations.
Right.
We can get into a debate there. Is that really a hallucination? I mean, I think that's a very, very big question, right? Some near-death experiences feature components of experiencers reporting a perception that does not seem to be coming through sensory input. So, for example, people are unconscious or under general anesthesia, and then they say, this is what was done to my body. This is what the doctor said to the nurse.
Right.
Sometimes very idiosyncratic stuff that cannot just be inferred.
Right.
And then in some cases, some of these elements are verified and corroborated by independent witnesses.
Right.
And so these kinds of cases that feature some kind of corroborated element argues against the fact that this is a hallucination.
Right.
And there's other aspects too. I mean, the fact that a lot of these experiences are highly vivid, highly coherent, even if they're talking about something extraordinary. There's a lot of coherence in how people report the experience. Rather than a disjointed experience, it's something that, while it may be extraordinary, it makes sense. And also the fact that these experiences tend to have, on average, a positive impact on a lot of people. That also argues against the fact that it's just hallucination, or rather how it's different from a hallucination. And going further, in terms of changing the impact on society, is right now we do indeed live as if we're all separate from each other, and in the confounds of, this is one physical life, you die, that's the end of it, which by necessity shapes our priorities, way of life as humans.
Right.
The best kind of evidence that comes from near-death experiences, at least, that points to maybe continuity of consciousness, is the kinds of cases where the near-death experiencer might experience a deceased person in the experience, but usually it's deceased loved ones that have been deceased for a while, and then they show up, have a message, bring comfort, say hi, or whatever. But there's also cases where the person might encounter a deceased individual that they didn't know had died, but experienced them as deceased within the ND, and later, upon coming out of the ND, confirmed that that person had indeed died. And there's even cases where they report an encounter with the deceased individual that they didn't know. They never knew, but later, in some cases years later, confirmed, oh, that person actually existed and I experienced them as such. So it's wild. So this is the kind of evidence that, it's limited, but the fact that any of it is out there should at least compel us to examine the possibility that there is some kind of continuity beyond death. And there's also a lot of evidence that argues that maybe mind and brain are not the same, is that your mind and consciousness is not just your neurons firing.
Right.
Because there are some cases in which these kinds of veridical perceptions happen when the brain is highly impaired in a way that is not consistent with our mainstream understanding of what should produce vivid conscious experience.
Yeah, the best case of this that I've read about was Dr. Eben Alexander, the
Also,
neuroscientist.
yeah, and another very good case is Pam Reynolds.
Ooh, a new one for me.
If you this lady was undergoing some procedure where she had to have her blood, she had a brain aneurysm, she had to have her blood drained out to fix it. And the cool thing about her case is that she was monitored via EEG. So which is a very direct assessment. Whereas in the Eben Alexander case, we can reasonably assume, based on his condition of having bacterial meningitis, what was happening in his brain.
Right.
And it is a great case, but he wasn't actively.
Oh, I misunderstood that. I had thought that he was. Okay.
I don't think that he was, but his case is indeed also very very compelling. And Dr. Grayson and two other medical doctors have went through a very extensive 3-way review of his medical records, which, by the way, I have this
so
box
cool.
here with.
I won't say where that was. Yeah.
With part of his medical records, and they independently reviewed them, and all three determined that his condition was, according to the medical records, so poor, so impaired that there was very low chance of survival, let alone having the kind of extremely vivid perception that he had reported, including verifiable perceptions. He actually,
his sister.
He's a good example. Yeah, he had a vision with his sister. I think it was a biological sister that he didn't know.
They had been separated at birth.
Yeah, that he didn't even know existed, but later confirmed. But going back to what I was saying previously, so all of this data exists that should, at least make us open to considering the possibility that consciousness continues, that maybe there is some ontological reality. I know it's provocative, and I know it may be crazy to some to say this, but I think some of the evidence should at least make us open to this possibility.
Right. This isn't a Monster of the Week X-Files episode that we just leave an open-ended question and walk to the next idea. This is something where there's enough evidence here that, hey, maybe we should be looking at this a little more closely.
I think there's at least evidence to be looking more closely, and of course, there's a saying reasonable people can disagree, and I believe that. I believe in that. People are allowed to disagree.
It's one of the more beautiful aspects of living.
Yes.
That we have these very different experiences which lead us to potentially oppositional conclusions.
Yeah,
and it's all fine.
And there's nothing wrong with disagreeing. What I think is unfortunate is when people say, "Oh, well, I'm not even going to look at that," and it's crazy.
Right.
But once we start considering this possibility, I mean, the implications for society are huge. Again, these messages of how we ought to treat each other, but also there's implication for end-of-life care. If we think what lies beyond is good, positive, not terrible, you have your loved ones greeting you, and this warmth and incredible love, unconditional love. I mean, people's descriptions of what this unconditional love feels like are very interesting. It's very ineffable, and people may struggle to describe it.
Yes.
But the message is very strong, like unconditional love, like nothing I've ever experienced on earth. So if that's what awaits people, I don't know. Should we be trying to prolong life at any cost. And
Right.
if someone is suffering, should we be trying to continue that
Prolonging the
suffering? And
suffering.
I mean, this is for people to decide. I'm just saying this,
100%.
it could have implications for that as well, and by extension, the medical system too.
And our policies and the ways that,
Yeah,
frankly, aspects of our government and our legal system operate.
yeah,
Like it has wide-ranging implications.
yeah. And clearly the way our societies and governments operate are, again, predicated on this very real idea we're all separate, we're
Yeah. Or each of us having a singular experience, which then has a finite
yeah.
period. Yeah. God.
But again, I'm not here to evangelize. I'm
No.
just, sharing
Yeah.
thoughts, and I just hope that more people would engage with this material.
And what I appreciate is
And
you're
it's not up to me. It's
no. And you're not just sitting here, and I'm not here to denigrate any of the prior works that I think have led to some of our capacity to have this, but you're not just leaving a book of hundreds of questions. You're going and saying, okay, well, this is a question. How can we start to answer it? And in the interest of also helping people understand who you are, you didn't just come to this work, and you're approaching this from, I think, one of the more reasonable directions that can be taken, especially when going through this. You're not sensationalizing. In fact, I'd say you're doing the opposite. You're making this very rational statement of what you are observing. And I think that's one of the best ways we can work toward communicating this information to people. Would you mind, and I know we're partway in, but would you mind helping folks understand how you got to this, how you got to DOPS in
Sure.
particular? And
Yeah, and I want to address the
oh, please.
sensationalizing.
Yeah.
I don't think, you know what? I don't think it helps our mission in any way to sensationalize this, and
Yeah.
we're not going around saying we've proven the afterlife.
No.
Although, of course, some people who read this material may say this, may interpret it as such, or a journalist or whatever. It's important to us as researchers and scientists to be, very careful about how we talk about
Right.
this evidence, and not to oversell it and not to overinterpret it.
And you're not editorializing it either.
Yeah, well, I'm trying not to.
You're trying not to. It's right. The evidence becomes strongly suggestive.
Yeah. As far as my own journey, it's hard to know where to start. So I would say, I started becoming interested in topics of what happens after we die. Maybe when in my late teen years, I had a few deaths in the family, including my grandfather, and I was trying to make sense of all of this. So I started reading some books at the time. They might be called occult books.
Sure.
It was mostly stuff about after-death communications and how when people die, maybe we can still communicate with those. And it was the experiences. It was books about the experiences of people. And so when I read this at the time, it was, it was definitely comforting to me. But beyond that, there was a part of me that felt like maybe there's some truth to that. I don't know. Maybe I recognized it on a deep level as something fascinating, and maybe there is a grain of truth in this. Maybe it's not just stories. So that's kind of where my original interest came about. And also even as a young kid, I was always interested in mysterious or hidden stuff and these mysteries. Like how do we solve mysteries? How do we unravel mysteries? Or like being drawn to topics that are mysterious, or where there is something to figure out, like a puzzle.
There's a thread to pull.
Yeah, exactly. And so jumping later on, I was studying statistics in my bachelor's. It's to a lot of people it might be very dry, but to me it was quite interesting. And this is way before data science was cool. Like back then, it was not a cool thing. As a matter of fact, at my university, I went to American University in Washington, D.C., which is known for, international relations, politics. And in that environment, studying statistics was profoundly uncool. I remember it was a conversation stopper at parties.
A stopper. Oh no.
Like people would ask me, what are you majoring in? And then I'll say statistics. Like, oh.
Oh, we're not inviting Marieta the next one.
Yeah, something. So I was studying statistics. It was just statistics is just a way, it's a tool to learn about a lot of different kinds of disciplines. And what was cool to me about it had I like math, but it also had this philosophical appeal. We had a question hypothesis, and how do we answer it? We gather data, and then we analyze it and see if it's supporting our hypothesis or if it's going against our hypothesis. And it appealed to me because it very much is how people's minds operate in the world.
Right.
So I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but I was in this discipline and, was studying. And then at some point I decided I want to start meditating and kind of reconnecting with my spiritual interests. And so I was very fortunate to be able to be a research participant in a study on transcendental meditation in Washington, D.C., at my university, and it was looking at the effect of TM on college students' well-being and school performance and whatever.
Sure.
So I was able to be part of that study, got TM training for free, and I started meditating. It was great. But how it connects to my work is very shortly after I started meditating, within a few weeks, I started getting these intuitive messages. At the time, I didn't call them that.
Right.
I didn't know what they were. But basically, intuitive messages telling me that I need to be doing this work and I need to be involved in studying consciousness. And I guess we don't use that word much around here, but parapsychology too.
Sure.
And at the time, there was this sense of, there's a lot of people need the science where it's a revolution of sorts. There's a lot of people who have these experiences, but we still need the science to try to make sense of these experiences.
Right. It's the lingua franca right now. It's how we
Yeah,
make sense of.
Yeah. And now, yes. So that was part of this intuitive message that I was getting. And to be very honest, at the time, that was not what I was trying to do with my life.
No.
I knew I would have to get a lot more education to be in a position to do this. I knew I would need probably a PhD to be doing this. And at the time, I was kind of done with school, didn't want to go back to school.
Yeah.
And I was resistant to this. And first of all, where is this coming from? And the message was very persistent. The more I tried to push it away, the more it
pushed back.
The more it pushed back. And eventually I was able to accept it and say, okay, I accept this, but I'm going to reconsider that. So the reason I'm mentioning this part of the story is because it just feels to me that's how I interpret it for myself. I was asked and called to do this work. When I say called, I don't mean that in a religious sense, but that is how the whole thing originated. And then it took me years. I went about and did what I was going to do, which was get a job in statistics, working in a medical research nonprofit in Washington, D.C. And it was nice, and I was learning a lot. But honestly, eventually it got boring. I just felt like I wasn't learning that much. After, several years, I was always working on other people's research. So I went back to that idea of maybe I really want to do this. And I never, once I accepted the message, I never forgot it. It was always in the back of my mind. And then it got to a point where I said, okay, if this is happening, I better move with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I considered what are all the different ways that I could go about studying that eventually. And so I considered a few possibilities, and I decided I I think experimental cognitive psychology would be the way to go, because it's a lot of what's going on is about the mind.
Right.
And so that's what I decided to do. And I didn't, at the time when I was applying to grad schools, I didn't have any experience in psychology or neuroscience. I'd never taken a single class in either of these disciplines. But it worked out, and I eventually got into a good PhD program. I do think my statistics background helped. And so I guess you could say I diversified my training, learning a lot more about psychology and the mind and the brain. I would say it did take a lot of work, a lot of effort, of honestly even struggle. But once I committed to, okay, I'm doing this, things just lined up, not necessarily in the easiest way, but the path was created and the opportunities were created or showed up for me to end up here.
Yeah. God. And I'm going to leave any of the woo sentiment out of my
Yeah.
response here. But it does, I say that, and then I say, but it does feel like once we have found the work that resonates with us, either we find a way or the world helps us get there.
I agree. And the reason, and again, maybe I left out there's more woo aspects to this, which I
100%.
left out. But the reason I'm willing to talk about this is because there may be someone in your audience who is getting intuitive messages about something. We're being called in a certain direction. And I want to inspire people to pursue that and not ignore.
Because it's not the easiest thing.
These signals, especially if they're consistent and persistent.
As someone who has buried his head in the sand in the past, here we are. I'm sitting in your office right now, so that's however it works. I just gotta say I'm really lucky. And
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share
absolutely.
all of this.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? I would give this to everybody if I could. I would like to come back to some of the other elements. And I really like framing up how you got to this point, because I think that does build a bridge for people to understand, like, you're a pretty serious person. You've got a pretty rigorous mindset on the way that you're approaching this. Statistics isn't something that somebody just does casually. And I think that it helps to shape the way that you think about things and gives you a tool set, which brings us back to exactly where we were. We've talked a little bit about NDEs and we've made some reference to it. I have a few other areas that I'm fascinated in. One is the pre-life memories. And one of our conversations prior to this taping is also how and when children stop having these experiences. As I understand it, that's something that you're actually really interested in right now as well.
I am interested in it, but I don't have a study yet, but I'd be happy to tell you a little bit.
Sure. Thank you for that clarification as well. That's important.
But I think it will be a study at some point. So basically, we have a huge database collected over almost 6 years of these young children who appear to be talking about memories of past lives. And we're talking about very young children. I mean, age 3, sometimes age 2. Who might start saying things like, "You're not my real parents, and I miss my other family. And when I was big, I used to do this or that. I used to have a family." Unfortunately, a large chunk of these kids also talk about stuff that's traumatizing, like maybe how that person who they claim to have been died. So there are also traumatic, distressing elements to the child, and by extension to the family. Sometimes they might have birthmarks or birth defects that are related to mortal wounds of how that person died. This line of work is related to the beginning of DOPS, which was founded by Dr. Ian Stevenson in 1967. He was the chair of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and he had taken an interest in these cases because he kept hearing about them. And so he traveled to India and other Asian countries to look for these cases, and he found many of them that were so fascinating that he decided to dedicate the rest of his career to studying them, to pioneering a protocol for studying, investigating them, trying to verify them. So this is the bulk of what DOPS has been about historically, and nowadays I'm also involved in this work. But directly to your question, so yeah, some of these children appear to be very involved. Maybe, of course, the ones who are talking, not every child talks about past life memories, but if a child talks about past life memories for a while, they may be very involved or not, or they might mention stuff. And then, as they age, even if they were very emotionally involved in whatever they were saying, they sort of tend to move on and stop talking about the memories. So that's another interesting feature of this phenomenon, that a lot of kids they move on and they seem to stop talking about the memories. Usually that may happen around 5, 6, 7 years of age.
Okay.
And it's important to note that stopping to talk about them is not the same as they forget about them. And so we can speculate about why that is. There's never been a formal study in any way to indicate why, what's contributing to the kids kind of moving on.
So my speculative questions would remain speculative.
Right.
Whether
so my
I think
speculation, well, Dr. Tucker, who's our previous director and who's done mostly investigations of American children, he would always say, when asked that question, he usually said, well, it's because, it's around the time that kids go into school and maybe they're socialized differently and they're exposed to more experiences. So maybe it's about that. And I think maybe there is something to that. Although nowadays a lot of children start going into group care a lot earlier than
that's a good point.
School, and including learning a lot at a younger age. So I have a hypothesis that we have not found a way to test yet, but I'm hoping it could turn into a study at some point, that what may be happening is that this is also around the age that the brain undergoes a lot of changes. And so maybe there's specifically certain networks in the brain that we think may be related to exceptional experiences in general that may be changing or forming around that time. In particular, there's the default mode network, which is a network of brain regions that are activated when a person's mind is mind-wandering, when you're not focused on a particular task, but you're just in your head thinking, daydreaming, thinking about yourself, thinking about what you're going to do later. When you're just in your head, but you're not focused on an external task. So it's been proposed that this particular brain network acts as a filter, where when it's active, it's focused on, or rather when it's deactivated, it's associated with the presence of some of these extraordinary transcendent experiences. It's also found in a lot of research with psychedelics that this network is deactivated. It's possible that this departure from talking about the past life memories is associated with that network becoming more structured and more functional in children.
Got it.
So, but also it's important to say that I don't, even if we find some evidence for that, I don't think that there's only one factor, because indeed early childhood is a time of a lot of changes. Also, it's around the time that kids start talking a lot more about or caring a lot more about what other kids think.
They start developing their theory of mind, essentially.
Yes. And so there may be some component of, I'm not going to talk about this because I realize it's weird.
These kids are looking at me strange, right? I don't get invited to the party.
Exactly, or maybe not even in my family. So we don't know. There's a lot of possibility.
Yeah, and I love that there's almost a continuity of the story here. I recently had a conversation with Dr. Jeff Tarrant out in Eugene, Oregon, who does a lot of neurofeedback work and monitoring.
Mhm.
And in his experience, monitoring people in varying psychic states, he a reduction in activity in the default mode network specifically, as well as the right parietal lobe.
Yeah.
Um, and and that tracks exactly with what you're describing. And what he's measuring is activity in adults who start to have experiences. And one of the questions I was going to have, noting that a lot of, I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, the bulk of your research on pre-life or past life, purported past life memories, occur in children.
Yes.
A return to the capacity to have this understanding or experience may also be possible when you disengage those areas of the brains in adults.
Yeah, and one could do that through meditation as well.
Exactly. Oh, I was so curious about other
Which
ways.
is why, I mean, you're right. There's all of these connections that point to the involvement of the default mode network, and also across a variety of experiences.
Okay.
So in that context, then it's not surprising that people might get insights.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to explore this, because the more we understand how that may happen, the more we can think of ways to have these experiences at will.
Right.
Once we understand, well, I mean, the mechanics, the mechanism, that's a very, very, very
Stating that it's at
strong,
will is a very big statement.
very, yes, mechanism is a very strong word, because I think this is a lot more complicated than we realize. But even just having clues as to what factors may allow these experiences to happen will get us a little bit closer um, to maybe being able to work on inducing them at will
Right.
for the people for whom that's desirable.
Right. And to your point, meditation seems to be a very strong approach to it. And it takes a lot of work to get to a point where you can start to manage that. Psychedelics is another one where you also have opportunities. And I know this is an interesting topic, but opportunities to also experience what you had referred to in some of the near death states of the euphoria and the love and the forgiveness and the acceptance.
Yeah.
Um, there's also the induction, as I understand it, of trance-like states, either through, say, rhythmic shamanic drumming. Hypnosis seems to be an approach,
Hmm.
which has my curiosity piqued as well. And I don't necessarily understand the mechanisms of each of these, but there's something, it again seems like there's an open question on how real this is and how we measure it. And I, again, it's where I start to really.
And I don't have the answer, but you just
Sure.
listing all of these things, I think an important point is that we need experts from all different kinds of disciplines to come together and
Yeah.
uh,
Which seems weirdly difficult in the current state of academia.
it does, but I firmly believe that, things are shifting.
Good.
I couldn't, I can't give you,
No.
hard data, but I think more people, including academics, are willing to engage with us with a more open mind. And when I say more, I don't mean like the majority, but I think
No.
relative to, I think more people are willing to engage with these topics.
It feels like a pendulum shift. We've all gone into our areas of expertise and specialization, and we're kind of coming back home to the family table to start talking about what we've found. And now we're getting to say, oh, hey, I've seen this. Or, oh, wait, let me find this paper that talks about this from another angle. And we're in exciting times, in my opinion.
I agree with you. It's very exciting. And I perceive this shift not just in academia, but also in society as well. And I think the two may be related, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately scientists should care about what's important to people as well.
When you're talking about the way it's more relevant to life, I think is essentially what you're saying. It's this fascinating sort of convergence of I don't know how to say it, spirituality and neuroscience. and starting to see that they're not necessarily completely on opposite ends, never shall they meet, it might be a chicken and an egg question right now. It
Yeah.
might be, when will the two be able to be described in the same statement? And I maybe we're already there and I'm just not familiar with it.
Yeah, and we for sure can use the tools of science to study spirituality, and that has been done.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. I mean, 20 years ago, even doing research on meditation was, you know, pretty controversial, possibly career ending. And now we're at the place where it's pretty studying mindfulness, including from a neuroscientific perspective, is
Yeah.
fairly mainstream. My hope is that at some point that may also happen with the kinds of topics that we study. What is consciousness? Is it possible that there is some sort of survival or continuity beyond death? And admittedly, this is a very, very difficult thing to study. And I will also admit, I think some of the questions that people who are interested in our work may ask are metaphysical questions. They're not questions that can be answered by scientific empirical tools.
Right.
And I will admit that. So there's a lot of limitations to what we do, but I think it's still fascinating.
Well, Dr. Marieta Pehlivanova, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I could talk to you for hours.
Yes, we
and
could talk for
yeah,
much longer.
on so many other topics.
Yes.
And with that, I will let you go.
Thank you.
in
I'd
your
be
day.
happy to talk to you again.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
We'll make time. I'll be back out here, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you, JT.
Thank you, Marietta. Everybody, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next episode. All right, gang, that's it for today's episode. A huge thank you to Dr. Marieta Pehlivanova for taking time out of her busy week to share both her time and her work with us. Big shout out to Sue Lefebvre for making the connection possible. Could not have done this without you. Also, thank you to Dr. Pehlivanova's colleagues for taking the time to chat with me and for showing me around. The library? Amazing. I'm definitely coming back to talk some more. Dr. Gish, I see you, sir. And of course, thanks to Team NMS. Anna the Wild Orazan and Emily Rivers. This show wouldn't exist the way that it does without the two of you. Be sure to mark your calendars for our next episode, dropping in 2 weeks. It's another fun one. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment on the show wherever you are, and please share us with a friend. It really helps us to grow and bring on even more incredible guests like Dr. Pehlivanova. You can also follow along on Instagram at No More Strangers Podcast to keep the conversation going. Lastly, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, take care, keep exploring, and as always, I hope that you now have one less stranger in your life.